Good afternoon and welcome to the Addiction Show. My name's Miller and I am an addict. And I have two wonderful guests today. Laura M. Naredo,
Nice to be here, Miller.
MS, Master of Science.
Yes, sir.
It's a pleasure. And you are Vice President, Senior Vice President?
Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Thriving Mind South Florida.
That made it easier. Thank you. and John W. Newcomer, MD. And you are President and Chief Executive Officer.
Yes, at Thriving Mind South Florida.
And it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
I'm glad you're here. So before I get you guys started, just a quick story. The reason that you're here, that I pursued this, is first off, you're the best kept secret in town, and we're going to blow that out of the water today. So that secret's going to be gone. But the reason is two of your providers, and you guys will talk about what a provider is, who are providers. Two of your providers independently and almost simultaneously, and they hadn't talked to each other, approached me and went, Miller, you got to get on your show. Thriving Minds. They're the money people. And it happened the same way. Now, when a regular normal person speaks, they'll say, hey, Miller, go get Thriving Minds on your show. But these are addicts in recovery. And their way of saying it was important was, do you remember, Miller, when you were on Bird Road behind the Hess station, waiting for your dealer to show up and watching for the cops? It's that important that you get these people on the show. I'm delighted you guys are here. Why don't you tell us, what is Thriving Minds? What do you guys do? And why is it important?
Maybe I can start. So Thriving Mind is one of 7 so-called managing entities in the state of Florida. And we essentially create the safety net, mental health and substance use treatment services, as well as prevention services for people who are uninsured and underinsured. And that is folks who don't have commercial insurance, they're not a veteran, they don't have Medicare, they don't have Medicaid. Who pays? Well, in fact, this safety net system is there. And we'll talk today about different ways to access the system, but essentially we get a little over $100 million a year from the Department of Children and Families. Thank you to DCF. And while we try to support their child welfare mission, really our mission is primarily focused on mental health and substance use treatment and its prevention. We will perhaps today also talk about the fact that we go out and by statute, we're required to go look for additional sources of funding. So we get funding from the National Institutes of Health. We get funding from SAMHSA, another federal agency, Bureau of Justice Assistance, the Victims of Crime Act, federal dollars. So we try to put together a portfolio of services and funding, and we turn around and contract with healthcare provider organizations in the community. We're a nonprofit. We preferentially contract with nonprofits. We operate with an overhead of less than 3.5%. You think about that for a second, that's incredibly lean, great deal. Most of the dollars are going straight into treatment. So I think that's kind of the main message, and maybe Laura can talk about sort of the array of services and richness.
Sure, happy to do that. So John mentioned the treatment array that we serve, everything from prevention to treatment. And within there's a number of different services that people may be accessing. Everything from acute care services like crisis stabilization or detox services for someone who needs to detoxify from substances, to all the way down to prevention services in our schools, where prevention specialists are going into the school, giving messages on mental health promotion and substance use disorders to be able to educate teachers and youth and students on signs and symptoms and risk factors on substance use or mental health. all the way to outpatient traditional therapy that people think about when you think of behavioral health services. You know, the traditional, you're sitting on a couch talking to someone and getting help for your needs. So outpatient services and even residential services where a person needs to go into residential care, an inpatient type unit where they can get extensive treatment 24 hours a day, supervision and around the clock care. And intensive therapy. So we have an array of services that individuals can access that are in need in our community.
How many, you call them providers?
We call them network service providers
Network service
or
providers?
providers for short. And we have a little over 35 providers.
And where's your geographic area?
We serve both Miami-Dade and Monroe County. The bulk of those providers are in Miami-Dade. We have 2 or 3 in Monroe County. Different, community profiles, Monroe being more, rural, the long distance across the shoreline with the different islands. But one main provider, Guidance Care Center, is in all the different areas of Monroe. And then we have, Miami-Dade being urban and more condensed and dense with population. We have a number of providers all across the county, everything from Homestead to North Miami and everything in between.
And could you give us an example of a couple different providers and your principal providers and what they do?
Sure, we have a number of different types of providers. Our main big providers, you'll hear the term Community Mental Health Center, CMHC. And those, for some of you who might be familiar with the treatment center, are agencies like Banyan Health Center, Citrus Health Network, Community Health of South Florida, known as CHI, down in Homestead. And those are the bigger type agencies that is kind of one-stop shopping that have the bulk of all the services. And then you have some specialty providers that specifically focus on recovery support services or peer support services. You have the Miami Recovery Project, which focuses on substance abuse recovery. You have others like Fresh Start Drop-In Center, which focuses on mental health recovery. So you have a number of peer-run organizations which are run by individuals with lived experience in supporting others, that need assistance to be able to navigate the system. We also have specifically substance use only providers that only do substance abuse treatment, providers like Agape Family Ministry or Concept Health Systems. And we have others that just focus on mental health, like Douglas Gardens on the beach, and many more.
So there's a lot of plates spinning in the air here.
There are.
How do you, what kind of accountability? How do you determine if somebody's doing a good job and maybe their role needs to be expanded, or if maybe some provider, their kind of time has come and gone and needs to be replaced? How do you evaluate? I guess it's a lot of paperwork.
Well, so maybe I'll start.
Sure.
And so I think we counted, and we do something like 80 something reports a year that we turn into DCF or to the legislature. There's a tremendous amount of accountability and oversight in the system. Sometimes healthcare provider organizations aren't so happy about that because there's a lot of accountability. On the other hand, the way we do that accountability is pretty friendly. We're providing technical assistance. I mean, we have teeth. We can assess penalties. We can take away contracts if it's not working out. On the other hand, we do everything that we can to keep that network, functioning and strengthen it. Part of our contract from DCF requires us to fund only evidence-based treatments. So part of the technical assistance that we provide to these organizations is to make sure that they've got all the training in place for their staff, their teams, so that they are delivering these evidence-based practices.
I've been hearing a lot lately about peer support, PER. What is a peer, and is that and I was told, well, that's a missing piece of the puzzle that we're looking to expand that role.
Yeah.
So a peer is someone with lived experiences that have been through the system themselves. So on the substance abuse side, someone who is an addict who has gone through treatment, has gone through whatever their own personal struggles is with substance use. On the mental health side, it's someone that has a mental health diagnosis, that has had their struggles and is in recovery for mental health. So I totally agree with you. I think peers for a long time were the missing piece of the equation, and more being included into the treatment modality of care. So the agencies I mentioned previously, like Miami Recovery Project and Fresh Start Drop-In Center, are peer-run facilities. Their executive directors, their staff that are there are peers with lived experience that they themselves have had to navigate the system here in Miami and access services and care. And when people come into treatment and meet the individuals working at those centers, they themselves have lived experience and can help them navigate the system and say, hey, this is what worked for me. This is the way the system works. And it's a little different hearing it from a peer who's been there and done that and lived the experience versus someone who may have not been there.
Question.
Go for it.
Thank you. So there seems, though, to be a bit of an oxymoron where, so it's nice and vanilla to say a peer has lived experience, but that lived experience usually means jail, or have they been arrested? They've been beat up. You know, show me a hero, I'll show you a tragedy. So how are they able to pass the background check, having had a checkered past?
Well, so let me make 2 points. Legislation just passed this last cycle in the state of Florida to try to lower some of those barriers. The trick is you want to have background checks, because if somebody with lived experience is going to help the next person, obviously they've got to be safe to interact with, and you've got to be able to reassure everybody about that. Nevertheless, there were some I think everybody agreed there were some excessive barriers that made it really impossible or very challenging to finally get in and become a certified peer. The second point I'd want to make, it's slightly different point, is it's great to have lived experience, but you can't take just someone who has lived experience and drop them in the deep end and expect that they're going to be able to know how to best help people. So I think it's also very important that peers be provided with extensive training so that they're not stressed out and uncomfortable and like, what am I supposed to be doing next? Because people naturally feel like that. So our network also gets involved in contracting with providers who will do some of those trainings. Again, big emphasis on evidence-based practices. The Department of Children and Families developed some of that curriculum. There are other folks around the state that develop the curriculum, but very important in our view that not only do we have to onboard those peers, contract to get them involved in services, but let's make sure they're fully supported, because taking care of people, can burn folks out, and especially if you've received inadequate support and training.
So you have a training opportunities, and then there's still a certification process.
Yep.
Correct.
So that's two different entities are performing that. So there's a check and
Yep.
balance on that
Yep.
also.
Absolutely.
It can take a while to get to the certification, and yet there's a pathway to be working.
Correct. You can be a peer working towards certification and not there yet. So you can get experience in the workplace as you work towards your certification.
So from what I'm hearing is the legislature in Florida is more open than they used to be, and able to change the standards for being a peer and increase some funding, which goes counter to what many think about, our legislature in fairness. So what's changed in the legislature?
Well, I mean, obviously a lot of people had to get behind this, but a special shout out to Senator Rouson, who's been a huge champion, not only of the safety net, the managing entity system in general, but he's also
Where is he located? Where's his district?
He's out of Central Florida.
out of Central Florida, but he's
Senator Russo?
Rouson,
Rouson.
Rouson. And
A shout out to you, Senator
Yeah.
Rouson. We
and
thank you for doing what
he
you're
will
doing.
tell you he's a recovering addict as well. And he's made a tour around the state. He's really taken a lot of time and a lot of effort to do a deep dive into the system, and then has turned around. And this is just one of the many legislative cycles where he's been very involved and tried to do extremely constructive things to make it even better.
That's wonderful. We'll
No,
make
he's
sure
been
he
great.
gets a copy of the show today. And thank you, Senator. It's important because it's, you hit walls all the time. And for some of the barriers to come down, like you talk about evidence-based, what's going to make sense in recovery?
Yep.
The county is one of your providers, yes?
The county is
Yeah.
one of our providers.
What is the county doing? I owe Mayor Cava a phone call, so you can help me with this
Well,
one.
I mean, just as we fund healthcare provider agencies throughout the county, some of those healthcare provider agencies, Laura mentioned several. One of them is Jackson Behavioral Health. We fund Jackson Behavioral Health. The county also funds it. The Public Health Trust funds it. But there are also programs that the county has had for some years, or specialty programs that are excellent providers, and we contract with them each year to give them funding.
It's an interesting relationship because they fund us as well, and then we fund them. They fund us, and we partner for certain services in our community. One of our services, our partner programs, is through Banyan Health Center, our centralized receiving facility, which is a facility where people can come in for crisis support 24 hours a day for assessment and linkage. And if they need detox or crisis stabilization services, they can stay there. If they just need assessment and entry into other services, the CRF, the centralized receiving facility, will go ahead and make those linkages. And then as far as what we fund the county for that you were asking, we actually fund them for various different residential services for substance use, as well as outpatient services. They've changed their name throughout the last few years. I think they're going by Community Health Action Services Department, I think. But we do fund the county as well for different programs.
You know, as you're well aware, 106,000 died last year of overdose, just from fentanyl. 106,000 in the country. I don't know the figures locally, but my guess is probably a good guess that Dade County, unfortunately, had more of its share in that. You have the funding, you have these 35 plus providers in place. How do we kind of bring this together? I mean, I'm thinking more of the county, but the emphasis maybe on some providers more than others to do almost a Manhattan Project to push back. Certainly, we did in this community for COVID. The county did an incredible job to get us vaccinated, very successful. A lot of bang, bang, bang. Do you envision an expanded? I'm putting you in the spot, guys. But do you envision an expanded role? And certainly Mayor Cava can handle the scrutiny too. But how do we step this up? Because it's lives. It's lives.
So let me make a couple of points. One is that when you add together direct treatment services and prevention services, we're probably touching, somewhere between 75 and 100,000 lives. That sounds like a lot until you look at rock solid numbers from SAMHSA, the federal agency that keeps track of this. In the population that we serve, folks below 200% of the federal poverty level, okay, by our count, in a metropolitan area like Miami-Dade County, probably about 300,000 people who have serious mental illness, not any mental illness, but serious mental illness.
So that's 10%. We have just under 3 million.
Yeah.
In the county.
So serious mental illness or substance use disorder.
10%.
So lots of unmet need there. The second point that I wanted to make is we just are wrapping up our triennial needs assessment. So to your point, the Manhattan Project, what do we still need to work on? We go out to the community. We don't just go into the smoke-filled back room, and neither of us smoke, but even if we do, right? But we don't just make it up ourselves. We go out, we do focus groups, we do surveys, we touch, peers, consumers, providers, other stakeholders, faith-based organizations, and figure out, what is it that you think we're doing well, what's missing, where are the capacity issues. And then just amazingly this year, the legislature also increased the recurring budget to fund our services. The budget's not signed yet, but it may be 126 million, I think, sitting on the governor's desk of recurring dollars that would go into this statewide managing entity system and some of its specialty programs across the top.
So a couple of things. One, we were talking before the show about Starfish, and the logo for the show is Starfish. Could you put that up, Elian?
You're right.
And so the story, and usually I tell this at the beginning, but it's to the point, and we'll just do it in the middle here, is a man's walking along the beach, and there's just starfish everywhere, and he comes across a little girl, and she's picking them up and throwing them back in the water one at a time. And he says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" And she says, "Well, the tide went back out, and all these starfish were left behind. And if they don't get back in the water, the sun will burn them up and they'll die. So I'm throwing them back in the water." And he shook his head and he said, "Little girl, look around. There's thousands and thousands of starfish." He says, "What you're doing is just not going to make a difference." And the little girl picked up another starfish and threw it back in the water and says, "It did for that one." So it does. It works one at a time. We were talking about numbers, but those numbers all have faces, and they all have moms and dads and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters. And I was at the overdose awareness event that Miami Recovery Project had over at FIU. And by the way, I believe next year's going to be at the University of Miami. But they got up and they told the stories of their husbands, wives, daughters, and and that tragedy.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Miller, I'd add one more point there, and
Please.
that often gets, in the stereotypes that people have about mental illness and about substance use disorders, these are treatable conditions. These conditions, you'll hear testimony in front of Congress from the directors of the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the National Institute of Mental Illness, Mental Health. These conditions have treatment response rates that look like hypertension, diabetes, completely treatable conditions. The problem too often has been access to treatment. So major depression, for example, left untreated, has a bad outcome. Increased risk of suicide, lots of chronicity, people never quite get all the way better, and then you get into a lifelong sort of impact on your ability to earn a living and be with your family and make friends. But if you treat that condition and treat it aggressively, like you're supposed to treat blood pressure, okay, it can go away and then get managed. So I think that's our big part of our mission, is connecting people to those appropriate treatments, because the treatments work.
so one of my service commitments is with Miami Recovery Project. And by the way, they're moving this week into their new headquarters, into double the size. And they offer the Narcan training and distribution through DCF, peer support meetings. They're doing good works. And I've been bringing the head of that, Tommy, to other providers. Some are providers of yours, and some are other 501c3s that aren't under your umbrella, and sitting them down and introducing them and trying to make the connection.
Yeah.
So I do see, an area that I'd like to see growth in is that connection. We know the opposite of addiction is connection. So you have these 35 providers, and some of them are operating very independently of others, and maybe for some cases that's okay, but others, the connection would add so much more dimension to this recovery process. And I'm advocating for something you're already doing.
Yeah, our contract requires
I was
them
just thinking
to
that.
connect everybody to everybody. There's a concept within our system called no wrong door, meaning if I walk into provider number one, let's say provider number one doesn't have exactly the program that I need, they're supposed to call us up or just call up one of their brother, sister providers directly and hook this person up. It works, and we hold them to it. So I think it's a critical concept.
No, and I'm glad we're on the same page with that. I think the day starts early, 6 a.m, whatever. You have your coffee, you go to work, and as soon as you get there, and for the next 8 or 10 or 12 hours, you're absorbed in your mishigas, in your mess. And the idea of, oh, by the way, if you made this connection, it's a two-way street, and maybe this can make this look easier. And again, at the end of the day, what is the evidence-based results for the individual? So I'm going to keep doing that as my Misfit project and connecting it.
Well, and remember, there's some medical conditions that strike people. Hypertension, diabetes, heart disease tends to strike people later in their lives. treatable conditions. But if you really wanted to be cynical about it, you'd say, well, if the treatment turns out well, that's great. You're going to help them maintain their quality of life, their productivity, their ability to earn a living, for 10 more years or 20 more years or 25 more years. These conditions that we're talking about today, mental health conditions and substance use disorders, characteristically hit people very early in life. You could be looking at 70 years, of future life course that's going to go one way or another. And if you can get somebody aggressively treated at the beginning, they can, return to work, they can return to their family, their social relationships, and end up having, being a huge contributor to society.
I know a lot of, I'm in a 12-step program. Not that that's the only pathway or only answer. As long as you're not putting a needle in your arm and you're getting better, I'll be supportive of that. I know a lot of walking miracles.
Mhm.
And in fact, a guest that I'm going to have in June, he came in very young, just a real, the business term, I guess, would be scumbag. Guy was, and he's now,
We don't use that term.
we don't know.
I'm teasing.
He wasn't a good
He wasn't
guy.
nice.
He wasn't. No, he was a dumpster diver. He was just didn't have any life skills. Didn't have any social skills.
Yeah.
And I watched this guy grow, and now he just became officially a medical doctor
Fabulous.
and a super guy.
Yeah.
And a guy you just feel like just sharing lunch with.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of thing. So there is hope. We lose people
Absolutely.
too, unfortunately, but there is hope.
Yeah.
So what are you doing in the schools?
Sure, we have
Laura?
a number of different school-based treatment. A lot of our prevention, if not exclusively our prevention treatment, is all in the schools. There's not enough funding to be able to be in every school, so that is an area that we do try to advocate for and try to get to all the high-risk schools in the community. And it's prevention education. It's going to the schools, giving those students the knowledge for risk and protective factors. Let them know, hey, this is a sign and symptom of mental health, or this is a sign and symptom of substance use. And if they need to get linked to additional treatment services, allowing the teachers or the administrators to be able to make those linkages in the schools.
If somebody, either an individual or a potential provider, wants to get hold of you guys, how would, what would they do?
Well, I think at the end of the program, we're going to show you the website. It's thrivingmind.org.
Well, we're nearing the end,
we're nearing
actually,
the
so
end.
we're gonna.
But
we can look at
there's
that
a phone
now.
number up there. There's thrivingmind.org is up there. We've got a website we're really proud of. You can go on there and you can see across the county a map and hover over each of the little flags and see what is this provider that looks pretty close to me? What's the services they offer? But if you want to just call us up, you just call us up. But we help with a lot of access issues, and the goal is to get people connected with treatment and keep them connected.
So you were, up until the last half hour, one of the best kept secrets, if not the best kept secret. What message would you guys want to put out there to the community? I know you're doing whatever you can to make that connection, to know that Thriving Mind is out there. What would you say to the?
We'll each take a shot at this.
Sure.
I mean,
Please.
my message, I think, you've let me do some of this, which is totally treatable conditions. This is all about early recognition and getting in there, just like, recognizing that somebody has high blood pressure. Okay. If you don't check it, if you don't know what to look for, you're not going to recognize it. You're not going to treat it. And then that guy's going to have a higher risk of stroke and myocardial infarction. Okay. Let's raise awareness starting in the schools, get people looking at this, destigmatize mental illness and substance use, and then connect people to services and, tell the story.
Or,
And I'll be super quick. It's hope. It's a message of hope. It's very
I like
treatable.
hope.
It's very
Hope is good.
treatable. There's services out there. Come call us at our number. You saw the number on the screen before, 305-858-3335, or go on our website and just call us, and we're happy to help. And there's hope out there. There's treatment available for your loved ones.
So to the audience, I would say, if you want to get hold of me and have comments about the show, Miller@cnews.net. Also, you can use the same email if you want to sponsor a show. We're talking about money today. Money pays the bills. We need 2 sponsors. So feel free to reach out to me on that. Or if you want to be a guest on the show, again, Miller@cnews.net. If you're having, you can certainly call Thriving Mind, or if you're having a problem with addiction or have a friend or loved one having a problem with addiction and don't know where to turn, MiamiRecoveryProject.org, MiamiRecoveryProject.org. Before we sign out, I want to give a shout out to my son, Josh Myers, United States Air Force Sergeant in Germany. Thank you for your service, son, and be safe. Thanks, guys. You're great guests.
Thank you.